You dissolve everything and everyone's happy. Everyone's jumping for joy.
At first.
But then you start going down the list of all the things that you still need to maintain. Who owns it? Who maintains it? You start going down that list, and it basically says, well, you should probably put together a committee.
Or at least get together and see who's going to volunteer to be the person who gets the contract for the security. Who's going to go and get the gardeners and sign that up and deal with that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Start voting as to who does this.
Exactly.
Right.
So pretty much you've now decided that we're all going to get together as a community and have meetings to decide who's going to do what and how are we going to do it. What's that sound like to you?
Exactly.
HOA.
I'm Luke Carlson, and for almost 2 decades, my law firm, LS Carlson Law, has been at the forefront of defending homeowners against overreaching HOAs. We're not just leading the charge, we've created the go-to playbook on how to fight back effectively. Join us as we delve into the world of HOA disputes, sharing insights from our extensive experience and landmark victories. Throughout this podcast, we'll bring you in-depth interviews, demystify complex legal principles, and provide practical tips to safeguard your rights. While the information provided shouldn't be taken as legal advice, our aim is to empower you with the knowledge, strategies, and real-life success stories needed to navigate and overcome the challenges posed by overreaching HOAs. Hi, Luke Carlson of Bad HOA. Welcome back to the show. We have our co-host, Marty. Marty?
Hello there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's a little shake-up from the morning.
I know. And a very special guest today, Ryan Davies, partner at LS Carlson Law, and absolute wizard when it comes to a very special topic today. Welcome, Ryan.
Good to see you guys again.
Good to see you. And
on the show, I mean.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to the show. We've had you before, and I brought you on very specifically for this one because this is such a hot topic, and we deal with it all the time. It's what I call the nuclear option, and it's the dissolution of an HOA.
Right.
And I love this one only because it's a very natural response to a bad HOA. It is, I hate my HOA. I want to burn it to the ground. I'm fed up with them. Let's just dissolve. And there's real, I think, logic as to why the brain goes there, but there's very practical considerations when we talk about dissolution. It's not just a switch where we switch the HOA off.
Exactly. And we get into the details of that, but it's important to think that you'd separate the steps and what's involved from the emotion of I'm mad and want to burn this down.
Right.
And doing that a little bit, hopefully that's what we can do here today.
Well, I'll be honest. I dug into this and not knowing what makes it so difficult. And when you think about it practically and start going through this, you're like, oh, I can see why it's completely not practical to a certain extent. It can be done, but we'll get into the reasons why.
Well, it's demystifying the space.
Yeah.
And it's sort of articulating and hopefully empowering homeowners to understand maybe this isn't the avenue you chase, you burn resources and time, and maybe we look at the equation a little bit differently. So with that said, Ryan, why don't we start from the top? Marty, do you want to guide us? I know we've come up with a very detailed outline, hopefully to be very thorough on this because there's a lot of angles, a lot of things to consider. So yeah, if you want to take the lead or.
Yes, sure. Okay. I think it's important to kind of frame why the HOAs exist in the first place.
The utility.
Yeah. Because once you understand why they were made, I feel like there's a good explanation on why they're difficult to unravel.
100%.
So we have 3 main categories, and Ryan, I'll defer to you. We have the who wants HOAs to exist, and in those we've got cities, banks, and homeowners for the most part. So if we want to unwrap that, let's start with cities. Why do cities want HOAs to exist?
Cities want HOAs to exist because we get into the concept here of maintaining certain areas. And in an HOA, there's a big division between what's called common area and then your separate interest. Separate interest is what you own when you buy a property within that HOA. The common area is everything else. And homeowners own common area, undivided joint interest with everybody else. But that doesn't mean that you get your tiny portion of a swimming pool. that common area has to be maintained by somebody, and that is the HOA's function. So when an HOA does that, it means that that development can enjoy that common area, and it's self-maintained in that, as opposed to a city doing it. Like you'll see a lot of HOAs in gated communities where the roads are actually private. So the city loves that. They don't have to pay for it.
So money.
That's a big one.
Let's just call it what it
Money
is.
and hassle.
They're saving money and hassle.
Sure they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's city. So that's the utility of an HOA for a city.
Let's quickly hit on banks then, lenders specifically, and we talked a little bit about title, but just get the bullet point on lenders.
Bullet point on lenders is, again, would come back to that common area concept, because what I own, and let's use a condominium because that's an easy example. Condominium, usually one unit attached to another. Sometimes there's a common roof going over both, et cetera. So what I own is my interior space and a portion of that roof. So when I'm getting a loan on my property, what my real estate interest is my interior, plus I own a portion of this common area, which is being maintained by an HOA. So a bank looks at that and says, okay, the collateral for this loan we're going to make to Ryan is the interior of his condo, plus it's all attached to outside, but we know that that outside is going to be maintained because there's an HOA there. So we're not worried about the roof falling in and then our collateral is damaged.
Yeah.
So maintained in theory.
Yeah.
Maintained
Right.
in theory.
In theory.
Yeah.
And then the last would be
So money, though.
money.
Again, money. Right?
Yeah.
And then homeowners. Homeowners like to be there's. I mean, when you sign up for an HOA, you hope that you get access to all these great amenities.
Exactly. And it's, again, with common area, you're paying a little bit monthly to hope that this is being maintained properly so that you don't have to go out and do it yourself. Even some single family detached with HOAs, you will see HOAs can be responsible for exterior paint, roofing. Some of that is to keep harmony in the way things look. But it's nice to know that if I'm paying this amount monthly, I'm getting these things in return, meaning I'm not going to get a surprise one month and need a $40,000 roof or decide I need to go get my house painted for $15,000. So it's easier to budget in that sense.
Yeah. And then, at least here in California, all HOAs are under the umbrella of the Davis-Sterling Act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Broad answer,
Yeah,
yes.
broad
we can get into
hold on.
minutia of ones
Where's
that aren't.
your mug? It says it
All right,
depends.
stop being a lawyer. 99% of that answer is yes.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next part of this, which is what are HOAs required to do? And this is all lead up to the hurdles, right?
Yes.
Because I think once we set the stage and the context, then it's very easy for the people on the other side to say, okay, I understand what the hurdles are. So let's talk a little bit about what are the duties of HOAs. Even a bad HOA has a mandatory duty to something, right? So what are the duties that they are required to abide by?
The way I usually think about this is there's really three core functions that an HOA does. First and most important is maintaining that common area that we just talked about. Second, usually it's enforcing the CC&Rs and the rules. They have that enforcement function. That also includes collection of the assessments, making sure that people pay. And then there's a more community type factor, which is where you get the architectural committees, ensure that the neighborhood looks the way it's supposed to look according to what's in those CC&Rs, making sure that there's remedies for people that decide they want to paint their house purple, something like that. And when you have an HOA, that's the enforcement mechanism so that the individual neighbors don't have to try and fix that kind of problem with another individual neighbor.
Or deal with like holiday lights in June.
Exactly.
Having cars on cinder blocks and. So.
I mean, again, that's why some people like the HOAs. They know that their neighborhood is going to be nice
When it works.
when it works.
When it
When it
works.
works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the conversation I have a lot of times in consultations with people. I say, there's pros and cons to this. Pros being someone else is taking care of all of this.
Yeah.
Pros meaning I don't have to go replace my own roof sometimes. Cons, I'm paying for it. And yes, that means I'm giving control to a certain degree over what I do with my property to someone else. I mean, I had a client one time, great guy, who owned a very high-end property and was calling us the consultation and basically told me, I just paid X millions of dollars for this property. I don't want somebody to tell me what to do. I told him, well, that's exactly what you did. Yes, you paid this amount of money in order to have someone tell you what to do.
Right.
That is it.
Well, that's the trade-off at the end of the day. You know, you're and I think for most buyers, the assumption is it's going to be a good HOA. It's going to conform with the rules, the CC&Rs, the Davis-Sterling Act, and things are going to go beautifully well. Yeah. As we know, based upon the name of the show, it's not always the case, right?
No.
And then I think that it's important that there are, at least in California, that we have a little note here that there are, under the Davis-Sterling Act, HOAs must maintain common area. That's not optional. And HOAs must levy assessments that are tied to property ownership. I think one of the key points that we mentioned here is if the HOA dissolves, these duties don't vanish, they transfer to someone, right?
Exactly.
So that's, we're leading them in here.
To the massive hurdles, or I guess logistical dead ends. Maybe that's a way of looking at it. Because where does this all go if you do dissolve? Let's run it through.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, that's a perfect lead in to hurdle number one, which is the CC&Rs won't let you.
Yes. And just talking about CC&Rs is really stage two. The first one is recognizing the concept here that there are, the HOA as a corporate entity is governed by corporate law and to an extent Davis-Sterling. And then there's the whole real estate portion of it, which is what does this HOA do? That's what we've just been talking about, maintenance, sort of community factors, et cetera. The corporate part of the HOA is relatively easy to dissolve, just like any other corporation. That's the easy part. The hard part is all of those obligations, as you were saying, don't go away. Those CC&Rs are recorded in the chain of title. They're actually a set of promises, if you want to look at it that way, that you agree to when you buy into this property. Whether or not there's a corporation enforcing those is a separate issue. And there are HOAs that are unincorporated. I've seen HOAs that are voluntary, and we can go down the road with something that nebulous. But point is, all of these real estate obligations are still there. And those need to be addressed by something.
Yeah.
So maybe put
An
a finer
HOA is a
point.
way. So really what your thought is, if I want to do away with my HOA, the question is, okay, well, what am I going to replace it with? That's really the question.
And maybe we get into the notion of corporation. What does that actually mean? And I often see it confused where they talk about a board, but you're also talking about a corporate entity, then you have board members. So maybe let's demystify that little piece as well, because that's a huge piece of it.
It is. And so 95+% of HOAs are corporate entities. And they're a corporation that is the same concept as any other corporation. They're nonprofits, but in California, it's called a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. And so it still runs as a corporation. It doesn't have shares of stock, like when you buy stock in Apple or something. It has memberships. And so any corporate entity is run by a board of directors. And that is when people talk about being on the board. That means they're a director, which is the role that directs this company and guides this corporate entity. They also have officers, which is president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, typically.
Right.
And with these type of corporate entities, those are the same as the directors. It's not like a massive corporation where you have a board that may or may not be largely ceremonial, and then you have all of the officers, the people that run it.
Right.
They're all the same because there isn't that much responsibilities. But yes, they're a corporate entity. The corporation acting through its board is who makes all the decisions about it. And property management company is a separate thing. We dealt with that once.
We've discussed that.
Exactly. But the bottom line is the buck stops with the corporate entity, and the corporate entity is just run by those people on the board. So the people on the board aren't your HOA. They're just merely shepherding the corporate entity.
Right. Well said. So thank you for that.
So let me ask you this. If you do get down to dissolving this corporate entity, does the law actually say that those CC&Rs are still in place because it's tied to the deeds of the home?
Good question. It doesn't explicitly say that, but it doesn't say that dissolving the corporation removes anything else. And since the CC&Rs are recorded in the title history, they're going to be there. But CC&Rs just being one of the aspects. All of the other things that you had been talking about are still there. Common area, who pays for what, who does what.
Right, so it's still a big ball of wax.
It is.
Even if you were to knock out the corporate entity side, which to your point is very, very easy to dissolve an entity. I think it's one filing with the Secretary of State.
Yeah, a little more than that, but it's paperwork. Is the point.
Exactly.
So let's real quick, even if you go down that road, there in the CC&Rs, it typically states what the majority or supermajority or how many people actually, or a percentage of the people have to vote on dissolution.
Yeah, I've seen that. Some don't even address it, but when I've seen it, it's like 100%.
Yeah.
So good
Which
luck
makes
getting-
sense, though.
Well,
You think about it.
Yeah.
You buy in, let's say there's 100 people in the community and one person buys in specifically to buy into an HOA or to have CC&Rs. The question then becomes, how do you protect that person or that purchase? If you're not going to have 100% voting and let's say it's 50%, well, then you're buying an asset that's quite vulnerable to the population because all of a sudden 50% come in, they dissolve, and all of a sudden you bought something different than what you initially bought.
Well, and then there's that one holdout that says, no, I like this. I bought into this. I want to maintain this. I mean, you're in
So the
some trouble.
100% makes sense, assuming you're going to go down that path.
Yeah.
But then the real trick, and which we'll get into as number 2, is it often requires the lender's consent.
Oh yeah, lenders and title companies. In the beginning, I toyed with the idea of responding to your question of dissolving an HOA. Can you? Yes. Should you? No. Thank you. Nice to be here this afternoon. I'm off.
Good podcast. 30 seconds.
Well, okay, let's
30
chip
second
away though.
podcast.
So the entity is relatively easy.
Yes.
It's some paperwork, right? Let's say there's something that says 100% of the members and everyone votes. So we get through those first 2 hurdles.
Sure.
Hurdle number 3, lender.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
That's again the same concept of all of these duties are still there. And when a lender makes a loan, the loan is secured by your property. It's the collateral is the way to think about it. And that collateral isn't just your property. It's the interest that you own in common with everybody else in common area. And it's the interest that this common area is going to be maintained by somebody else. And how all of this is going to work together. So if a lender starts looking at this and saying, well, this is what I agreed to when I was giving you this money. Now I'm finding out this may not be the same thing. And so lenders could say, oh, we're done. We're considering this a loan default. Write us a check for your mortgage balance. Or frequently within those loan docs, it'll make references to things like this. So you could look at mass defaults of everyone with a mortgage, which is not where you want to be. If you're talking about disbanding an HOA, it's because you don't like the way the HOA is working or doing. And putting yourself in mortgage default over it is probably a bad idea.
Probably.
Well, it also makes sense why the banks or lenders would say, no, I do not want this dissolved.
Right.
Because they say, this is a nice neighborhood. It's got, the Architectural Control Committee means that this is going to be nice and the property value is going to be maintained. Therefore, my risk is mitigated to a certain extent.
Right.
It all goes to hell when everyone starts pulling it apart.
Well, also the DNA of what you've your collateral changes.
Exactly.
Right. The nature of you say, okay, I like this setup. I like the fact that there's some common area, there's some oversight, and if that dissipates, well, that asset that you lent against, right, or used as collateral, changes fundamentally. So they want to protect that interest.
Do you ever see insurance companies getting involved in saying, hey, this I don't want anything to do with this, and them trying to put a stop, pump the brakes on the whole thing too?
Have I seen it? No, but would it happen? 100% guaranteed. Because we had talked about, I sound like the guy that keeps coming back to common area, but it really is kind of the linchpin of all of this, and it's the best example of all of this. So HOA has to insure this common area, whether that be a swimming pool or even walkways between individual units sometimes, things like that, or a parking lot that's shared. Without the HOA insuring that, who does? Now, the interest that people own is their separate interest plus a fraction.
Yeah.
If we're talking about 100 units, they own 1/100th of all of that. But it's not a segregated, it's an undivided 1/100th.
Yeah.
So as long as the HOA is insuring it, then I don't have to with my own insurance. If there's no HOA to insure this, then what happens? My insurance is going to say, wait a minute. Now let's say there's some liability event in this common area. Somebody trips and falls. Something as simple as that. Before, they could sue the HOA or go after a claim on the HOA's insurance policy. Without that, now what happens? They sue all 100 of you. Now your own insurer is saying, wait a minute, I'm exposed to a risk very different than what I thought I was here. So you're canceled. And then now you're looking at some different form of insurance. And especially California right now, 2026, you do not want to be shopping for a brand new insurance policy.
Yeah, it's so true.
But I mean, that would happen regardless of the insurance climate is suddenly you're changing that obligation as well. And those are the real practical implications of this.
Yeah.
We want to get right down to it. Insurance, lending, title insurance is a bigger part of that, but that's a really detailed conversation. I don't know that we get into here.
Yeah.
Point is, it gets complicated very fast with the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah. I think moving on to the next hurdle, the most interesting thing is talking about common areas. Okay, so you dissolve it, right? You dissolve everything and everyone's happy. Everyone's jumping for joy.
At first.
But then you start going down the list of all the things that you still need to maintain. and let's assume that it's the private roads, that has a private gate, that has private security, that has lighting and pools and a tennis court and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you start going down the list, who owns it, who maintains it, you start going down that list and it basically says, well, you should probably put together a committee.
Or at least get together and see who's going to volunteer to be the person who gets the contract for the security. Who's going to go and get the gardeners and sign that up and deal with that? Who's going to go deal with this or that? So now you're having meetings to decide how are we going to maintain the common area? And then who's going to pay for it? So somebody's got to decide
and who's going to
how
make
are we going to do
decisions.
that? And then whose job is it to collect it? So we're going to send you get the first 5 houses, go pass the offering plate. And if somebody's a little short that month, doesn't want to pay, okay, now who's going to go after them?
Or does it go up for vote? Right?
Yeah,
Start
exactly.
voting as to who does this.
Exactly.
Right.
So pretty much you've now decided that we're all going to get together as a community and have meetings to decide who's going to do what and how are we going to do it. What's that sound like to you? An HOA.
Which I suppose is the irony of the whole thing.
It is.
Right.
Of the
It is.
thought process or the running the tape on this. Assuming you hit all those hurdles, you overcome them,
Yes.
and you land on the other side of this, you're still in a predicament. You still have common areas to deal with. You still have logistics to deal with of a massive piece of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to the point here is that the city isn't just going to come and bail you out. They said, hey, they gave approval of this land to be developed based on the fact that there was an HOA there. They're not just going to say, okay, we'll take care of the roads now.
Well, it's interesting too on the corporate side. Let's say it's 100 people. They don't want personal liability either. They're not going to sign into agreements with a vendor, right? So most likely, what are you going to do? You're going to form an entity. You're going to have another entity that's formed, and there's going to be directors and.
I think once people unwind the fact that I want all of this gone and then realize, oh, well, someone's got to deal with this, someone's got to deal with this, and then just realize they just created an HOA again.
And it may be a less sophisticated form.
Yeah,
Without the.
that's it.
Well, that's what because what are we saying here? The king is dead. Long live the king. So that's really what we're thinking about is when we want to dissolve an HOA, what are we going to replace it with? And that leads to, okay, maybe there's a different way to do this, and we don't have to destroy this HOA only to replace it with a different
Well, that goes to the larger point, I think, of this podcast in general, right?
Right.
And I've seen it in consultations, you've seen it in consultations, where the opening sentence is, I want to dissolve, I want to burn it to the ground. And so the conversation is typically, the starting point of that consult is talking about what we just talked about right now, as to why it's not necessarily practical, and it will boomerang back to the point of, well, what are you going to do after you dissolve?
Yeah.
You're basically going to form another one. So once you get past that, though, we talk about other ways to enforce rights, other empowerment moves that a homeowner can take against a really dysfunctional HOA. Let's be honest. You're talking about dissolution. You're talking about unwinding an HOA when it's a bad HOA.
Yes.
Potential clients or clients don't show up saying, hey, I have a really good HOA. They're amazing. They're doing everything. I want to dissolve them. It's always the bad HOA.
Yes.
So then that consult typically flips over to, okay, strategically, how do we enforce your rights? What's being violated? So maybe we shift now into sort of looking at that a little bit in terms of an empowerment play.
I think we should just put just a button on the other hurdle too. So let's just say that you get it past the homeowners and you get it past 90% of the lenders, but there's just one holdout. This thing's gonna get tied up in litigation. Like someone's going to sue over the fact that they're dissolving this thing.
Oh, assuming, you don't have 100%.
You don't have
buy-in.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it says they could tie this thing up in litigation and just say the lawyers come in and in a lot of the case, California, it seems like they put a lot of rules and they don't really have a lot of say on whether or not this thing should be dissolved. They kind of put a structure in place knowing that they're going to be in place indefinitely.
Exactly. And the California specific law on HOAs, the Davis-Sterling Act that we've talked about a lot here, it doesn't reference dissolution of an HOA almost at all. It just isn't really contemplated. You go into corporations code that talks about things like this, but just the notion is that they're always going to be there and be in place. So its absence is what's conspicuous there.
Right.
But nobody was thinking that. And I don't think it's because it never occurred to them. I think it was just they didn't see this practically happening.
Because of all the things that we just spoke about, there's so many hurdles, like practical hurdles.
Yeah.
And just if one person throws the fight up, this thing can get tied up indefinitely and this thing will never get dissolved in the first place. Or what? Can you imagine you live in an HOA with 100 different homes? You've got 100 different lenders. One lender's going to be the bane of your existence. It'll never go through.
Yeah.
Or one insurer. That's all.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
That would be the.
And they would probably sue over it too.
That would probably be the more immediate problem.
Yeah. So let's go back to your point, Luke, on, okay, so this is practically not going to happen, as you can see from about 4 different points and 4 different angles that this is unlikely going to happen. So how do you make a bad HOA a good HOA? Then what's the angle then at this point? You've been on the other side of this consultation. I want to get rid of my HOA. You're gonna have to flip this narrative. So what are the actual steps that homeowners can take, both with and without an attorney? Like the first thing is, well, what do you suggest the homeowners do, and then what are the red flags to bringing on counsel to try to resolve it?
Those are a lot of questions.
Okay.
How much time do we have?
Well, I think in an overarching sense, what generally, you meet with a homeowner, they want to dissolve, sway them that it's not maybe the play. And then what typically are the options and how does a homeowner execute on those options? And is it driven by the attorney or is it self-driven to begin with, just sort of looking at the space from a more proactive perspective?
Right. So in terms of things people can do without an attorney, run for the board or encourage other people that have a practical mindset that aligns with what a lot of people in the community want and get them to get involved. Because really when people have a problem with the HOA, it isn't so much the structure of the HOA or its existence, as we've been talking about. It's how it's being run. Right?
The humans on the board.
Humans on the board.
It's a human problem.
Yes. So replace that. That's one way to do that. And that's I'm not going to say easy because it's not. But there are other ways that you can change the scope of what the HOA does to a small degree, meaning you can change your bylaws. You can change your CC&Rs. There are certain thresholds that it has to do, like we've been talking about, maintaining common area, et cetera. But you can change the tenor of it a little bit. And if you get enough community support, which is probably on par with the community support you would need if you're talking about getting people to vote to get rid of this,
Right.
vote to do that.
Right. If
That's
you're going
a
to
lot
go
easier.
politicking,
Yeah.
might as well do it in the right direction, or a way that actually gets traction.
Right.
Okay, I like
And
that.
then individually bringing in attorneys, if the concern is more individual to you, then there are a lot of remedies that we talk about in the consultations. There are mediation options, ultimately a litigation option, sometimes certain just, trying to negotiate things out.
Can you give a couple of examples of things specific towards that homeowner? Like you said, it's not the community; it's specific. Are we talking selective enforcement, or like what are you referring to? Like a couple of examples.
Sure, selective enforcement is a good one.
Okay.
Because again, HOA's job to that enforcement of the rules, the CC&Rs, et cetera, that's a core function. And when they don't do that or do that against certain people but not others, the cause of that almost always is the human element that we talk about. When that happens, then there are remedies there that bringing in lawyers to point out that you're treating this person differently than the others, and that's not right. That's one. The other maintenance function that we've talked about so much here, at least I have, when that doesn't happen, there are remedies there. You can bring in lawyers to deal with that. When, water intrusion, for example, or something like that, and the HOA is not stepping up to fix the things that it's supposed to fix or take the action that it's supposed to take, or not properly tendering it to its own insurance. Those are all things that attorneys can come in and help clients examine those options and walk them through which ones might make sense for this situation, which ones might not.
Well, I always kind of wondered what it would take to unravel these things, but it seems like the best remedy here is just solve the core issue here, and the core issue is almost never. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The core issue is never the HOA structure. It's never the main. The way it's set up. It's never typically the CC&R. It's typically the humans that are sitting there.
I liked how Ryan said it and positioned it. Typically not.
Yeah.
It is a human element. You got a bad actor. You got someone who doesn't understand the CC&Rs or what their role is, or you have someone who does, but weaponizes their position.
Yes.
Sometimes what we see, and I think you'd agree with this, is that there actually is some problems with the infrastructure. The CC&Rs are antiquated.
Yes.
They conflict. They're ambiguous. And that in and of itself can cause problems. But I would argue that a very well-functioning HOA, the human element, if you have good actors on the board, it sort of solves itself internally.
Right.
So it's not being weaponized against, one homeowner or a series of homeowners.
Exactly.
So
when you get practical people on the board that have a practical approach to how do we get this done, then that can make up for little gaps.
Right.
in your antiquated documents or something like that, and the idea that we should probably get these squared away. But if everybody's generally rowing in the same direction and in harmony and things are working out well, you don't really, in a sense, need them. Do you?
Right.
As long as everybody's getting along.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting along.
I think that you go into these. Everyone knows that you're signing up for an HOA when you're buying the house.
It typically isn't a surprise.
It shouldn't be.
If it's a surprise, there's some other issues maybe going on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you go into it because you like the concept of the pool, the amenities. This is a beautiful neighborhood. It's going to be taken care of, and all these things. So I would say in most situations, you go into it with the thought of, I like the concept of an HOA.
Yes.
Right? So it's just that the people in it sometimes can unravel the whole thing and make it a total disaster.
Right. And I guess to put a bow on this, it's, don't attempt to hit the nuclear option of dissolution. That shouldn't be your first knee-jerk reaction.
No.
And this episode I think is very important because, again, there was so much mystery behind this. And you see it, we have the Reddit, the subreddit, and people consistently say just, remove the HOA, disband the HOA, dissolve the HOA. And that's everyone's go-to. And then the comments under it are like, yes, let's do that. But at the end of the day, that's not the way to go. You're going to spend a lot of time, money, resources.
Right.
And most likely you're going to hit a horrible dead end.
Well, I didn't understand it. You just think that, okay, dissolve the club.
Yeah.
Like that's what you think. no architectural control committee, no more
Get rid of
club.
everything.
Fine, it's done. Everyone's wrapped up, but that's not the case. There's a lot serious. And just to in closing takeaway, I think we summed it up in these bullet points. If you don't mind, I'll read them off. Even if you dissolve the HOA, the shared property doesn't dissolve. Someone still has to maintain it, insure it, and pay for it. That requires collecting money and making decisions, which is an HOA.
Right.
Exactly.
You can have a smaller, quieter, less expensive HOA. That's realistic.
Yes.
No HOA at all with shared infrastructure. That's a fantasy.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, I got to say this was a great episode, Ryan, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy. We're close in offices. Your phone's ringing off the hook. So it really is.
Does.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I hope the viewers appreciate it as well. And Marty,
I'm sure they will.
thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Thank
Per
you.
usual.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's why we're
Ryan.
here. Hope
Yep.
it was educational and or helpful.
I would absolutely say it was,
Yeah.
at least from my opinion. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave comments, and check out our subreddit page, Bad HOA, if you haven't done so already.